Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we are going to be continuing What If Issei Was the Ghostwriter as we get into Highschool DxD Season 2, Mark of the Dragon, Season 2, Part 1. As always, if you like today's video and everything else that we have on the channel, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcasting as they come out now and in the future. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone. Yesterday there was no video. I was not feeling too well yesterday at all. Even today, I'm still a little congested, but I'm feeling a whole lot better than I was yesterday. So I thank you guys for that. As for next week, I've already posted the schedule in the community tab, so make sure you go over that so you know what's coming out next week. As far as What If Ben 10 was in the MCU, there is one change I am making to that series. Originally, I was going to do What If Andrew Garfield was in the MCU, that version of Spider-Man, to go along with that story both at once. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that really didn't make any sense at all. I tried to do it a few times, I wrote the script a couple of times, but it really wasn't working. And rather than try to make something that doesn't work, I've decided to drop that for now. So we're just going to be doing What If Ben 10 was in the regular MCU. We're not adding Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, nothing like that. Just Ben 10 MCU, and that video will be out next Saturday, so stay tuned for that as well on the channel. But other than that though, let's get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The sun was starting to rise as Issei pulled into the driveway of his apartment, slowly making his way up the stairs as he opened the door before walking in. It was already 6 a.m., only 2 more hours till school started. He would sit on the couch and try to recollect his thoughts, thinking about everything he had been through the night prior. Ever since he had been struck in the deal with Lady Mephisto, it seemed as though all he ever did was hunt, eat, and sleep. He seemed to be much more of a cyborg, going through his life rather mundane, not really seeming to be in tune with anything else around him. Issei and Rainier were living with him in his apartment. The two of them were sharing his bed in his bedroom, and he decided to stay on the couch for now, even though they persisted otherwise. Issei would always tell them that he would join someday, but really, he was just always out, always driving. The thoughts of Irina on his mind. He had only recently redeemed his parents' souls, and they were thankfully allowed to move up to heaven. But now though it felt as though he were stuck in his own hell. From the time that he had made his deal up until now, he had only managed to capture 10 of the 99 wicked souls. And even then, he wasn't any closer to finding Blackheart. Though honestly, how could you find the soul of a being that has none? He recalled the conversation he had with Lady Mephisto. She told him, to find someone like Blackheart, you do not search for the soul, but you search for the darkness within. You search those places in your mind that you dare not go. That is how you find Blackheart. You find him when you are at your lowest, when you are in your deepest and darkest of despair. It is only then that he makes his presence known to you. It's not something that you will feel through your own soul, but it's something that you will feel purely through the fear that permeates you. In a vague way of speaking, Blackheart was only going to make himself known when he wanted to. So for Issei, there was nothing he could do for now. His journey had led him to facing foes of all kind, from human to devil to demon themselves. After school, Issei would be preparing to head home when Asuya would approach him. She had been asked by Rias if they could use his apartment as a meeting place for the Occult Research Club, since the club room was undergoing maintenance for spring break. Issei agreed since he wasn't going to be going home right away. He could sense it. One of the 99. Without warning, Issei would hop into his car immediately, the black skyline peeling out of the school parking lot as it went racing down the street. Asuya was always used to this sort of thing happening. It could occur at any moment, but whenever Issei needed to go, he would go. She was supportive of him in every way, and she had come to forgive Rainier for what had happened. The two of them were slowly starting to patch things up, though whether or not they could really be considered friends, well, that was up for interpretation. Rainier was already overcoming her own demons so much, while everyone in the Occult Research Club welcomed her and were willing to give her a second chance. Rainier wasn't sure if she really deserved it after everything she had done, after everything she had put them all through. Was she really worthy of having a second chance like this? And even still, could she escape the dark shadow that loomed over her, that being of her father, as well as that of the leader of the fallen angels? That was something she would have to deal with in due time. Issei, in the meanwhile, would find himself driving until eventually he reached over to where the docks were. The sun was starting to set, and it seemed as though the entire lot was empty. As Issei got out of his car, he made his way towards the trunk. He had been trying to find a weapon that he felt best suited him, although for now, he liked the crowbar. It was light, efficient, with a nice back end for a heavy swing. As Issei went about walking from warehouse to warehouse along the docks, the water crashing by as he made his way, he could smell the scent of blood, and it was strong. He eventually made his way to the warehouse farthest to the back of the docks itself. Opening the door, he would see at the other side there were trails of blood everywhere, leading to a shark-like man biting and devouring into their bodies. Issei would instantly transform into his Ghost Rider appearance as he walked over to the man who turned back to him, smiling and cackling as he pulled out a rusty harpoon that seemed to be his choice weapon. Jinpachi Hoshigaki, you, a stray devil who left his master, and now you have committed great atrocity in this city. Yeah? And what's it to you? I am vengeance, and I am the one who will cast the judgment upon you. In the name of Her Majesty, I sentence you to righteous execution. The shark-like devil would jump high into the air, bringing down his harpoon upon Issei. Issei would hold up the crowbar up against the shark devil as the two of them engaged in combat. His experience with fighting various devils had shown that they all had different type of forms, powers, and abilities, all ranging depending on how you chose to view them. In doing so, this shark-like devil had surprising strength and speed, But Issei knew that its true strength would come in the water, as the devil seemed to try to scurry and make its way out over to where the docks were, to jump into the water where it knew it would have the advantage. Issei thankfully also kept a chain wrapped around his waist. After unleashing it, he would wrap it around the ankle of Jinpachi, pulling him back towards him and keeping him from escaping. The two of them would lock arms once again, Issei having to muster up a lot of his strength just to match power with him. Although eventually, he would manage to slam him to the ground. As the shark-like devil would scratch and claw at Issei, trying his best to snap and break him in half with his raw strength, Issei would turn the tide, flipping over him to the point where he had the crowbar wrapped around his neck. He would wrench back and get him into a bulldog choke on the ground. For Issei, some of these fights really were becoming up close and personal. A lot of these degenerates didn't want to go down without a fight, and it only fed into his savage nature more. Issei would wrench back one good time, until eventually there was a snap, his neck cracking and breaking in two, before it dangled on the ground. But Issei wasn't done. This devil had to be executed. It had to be exorcised. With that, Issei would slam him to the ground, as a flaming magic seal would form under him. The devil's neck would slowly snap back into place, as it felt itself about to move up once again. However, before he could stand completely, skeletal arms would wrap all around his body, cinching themselves into him as he went being pulled into the ground. Issei would clasp his hands together and hold him in place. This was the ceremony for which he would capture the souls. They would forcibly be dragged down to hell, to Lady Mephisto's domain. Once they were there, she and Danny Ketch would take care of the rest. After some struggling, Jinpachi Hoshigaki would be pulled down into the depths below, and nothing of him would remain but smoldering ash. With that over, Issei would depower himself as he was preparing to head home. That fight was a lot more than what he was anticipating, so much so to the point where he was truly starting to wonder just how long he could keep this up. Don't be mistaken, the Ghost Rider's power was definitely one of immense strength. It was rumored that the Ghost Rider in and of itself, the spirit of vengeance, was a power capable of handling even that of the Devil Kings, and even God himself. But of course though, Issei really wasn't interested in any of that. The only thing he cared about was finding Irina and bringing her home. Although he wondered what would have happened. How on earth was he supposed to go about finding her? Of course, he could try to attack another temple again, but now things were a bit more complicated. His first offense had already been passed over, but even Rias had to warn him. If he cured the wrath of heaven itself, even for all of the strength that he possessed, there was no guarantee he could actually win. In fact, in all likelihood, he would be destroyed in the process. And there was no telling what that could mean for the rest of the world. Issei would have to keep this in mind. He brooded over this as he made it back home. As he entered into his apartment, the meeting was just about wrapping up. Asuya deciding to show everyone Issei's baby pictures. He had a photo album with his family that survived the fire, and everyone decided to look through it. Issei was filled with a bit of embarrassment. Even Rainier was getting into the fun as everyone looked at pictures of baby Issei. But for Kiba, there was one picture in particular that caught his eye. One with him and Irina when they were younger, before Irina's parents died and she moved in with Issei and his family. It was the picture of the two of them, but what really caught Kiba's attention was the holy sword in the background. Issei could see that that picture had great significance to Kiba. He would ask him what it was really about, but Kiba wouldn't say anything, simply brushing it off before leaving with everyone else. As everyone was getting ready to go to sleep, Asuya being the first one to fall, since she had been tired from a long day. Issei was restless. He seemingly always was, and he did the one thing that he thought he could do when he felt as though he couldn't get any sleep. He decided to go for a late night drive. However, he wouldn't be alone in this. Rainier, who was also awake, offered to accompany him. He didn't mind since he didn't have anything better to do. The two of them driving off, the city being illuminated with lights as they drove past them. While the two of them were sitting together, Issei could tell that he wasn't the only one having a restless night. He could see that Rainier was also in conflict as well. He looked over to her and he asked what was wrong. Rainier at first tried to brush it off like it was nothing, but eventually she caved in. She explained that deep down inside, she didn't feel she was worthy of this second chance. That Issei and the others had every right to kill her and be done with her. So yet, why were they giving her this? For Issei, he wasn't sure how to answer in that moment. Under normal circumstances as a ghostwriter, in vengeance for what she had done to Asuya, he should have killed her in that moment. He thought back to that night in church when Asuya died. He remembered the hatred, the rage that was welling up inside of him. If it hadn't been for what Rainier had said about Irina still being alive, would he have killed her? And even then, would it have mattered anyway? Why did he spare her life? Did he truly mean to, or was it just on a whim? To be honest, he really had no clue himself. For a ghostwriter, the action that he took really wasn't that befitting of a ghostwriter at all. I guess that was just what made him different from everyone else. While they were driving though, Rainier would get a call from Rias, asking to meet with them. Asuya had already been summoned thanks to Rias and her teleportation magic. They had to deal with the stray devil. Rainier would say that she was on her way, and Issei, already driving her, would take her there as quickly as possible. It didn't take them long to arrive, and while they were there, Rias would actually ask Issei if he didn't mind helping. Of course, he was a part of the Occult Research Club, but he wasn't a part of the House of Grimmery. He was under no obligation to help them. But he didn't mind. After all, they were dealing with a stray devil anyway. That was the type of thing he had to fight. The deal with Lady Mephisto was made very clear. No one could help Issei capturing the 99 wicked souls in Blackheart. That was something he would have to do on his own. However, when it came to other strays and things like that, he was free to do what he wanted. It wasn't up to anyone else. And so he decided he would assist. He would join in with Kiba and Koneko to extract the devil, where Rias and Akano would finish it off. But Kiba seemed to be distracted, like he wasn't really himself in that moment. While they were going in there to deal with it, Kiba would be zoned out a few times, Koneko almost getting hit in the process if it wasn't for Issei saving her at the last moment. He would channel the powers of the Ghost Rider, binding up the stray devil before throwing it out of the warehouse, where Akano and Rias would finish it off, destroying it and burning it to ash and cinder. Once that was over, and everyone would make sure the area was secure, Rias would actually move over and slap Kiba, trying to ask and see if he was alright, but Kiba would just brush her off. Issei could tell in that moment that Kiba had been troubled by something, but he wasn't sure why, unless it was that holy sword. It had something to do with that, he believed. Before Kiba would leave, Issei would even ask if there was something bothering him and why he was spazzing out the way that he was. Kiba remarked that he had remembered the reason why he fights, his purpose, to destroy Excalibur. As he left, Issei had no idea what Excalibur was, so before leaving he would speak to Rias about it. Rias would tell Issei about the Holy Sword Project. It was an undercover experiment done by the church, forcibly using test subjects to see who could wield the Holy Swords, and that Kiba was a survivor of that affair. It was also surprising to see that Issei was actually in a picture with a holy sword, remarking to the one with him and Irina. This now caught Issei's attention. Irina had been missing, and it was obvious that the church was responsible. Also, there was a picture of the two of them as children, with the holy sword in the mix. That couldn't be a coincidence. But what did Irina have to do with the Holy Sword Project, if anything? And why did it seem as though everything was being connected now? Issei wanted answers, but he wasn't sure where to begin, and Rias was stumped as well. As the night would grow on, though, it would start to rain. Outside of an abandoned church, two girls would make their way inside. The first would be Zenobia, carrying the Holy Sword of Destruction. And beside her would be a girl who hadn't been in this town for a while. For her, everything in her life changed the night of the car accident, when she was taken away by a being of light, and she discovered her true destiny and her purpose. She learned about the life that her family lived, and that now she had been bestowed one of the greatest powers in all of the world. And she had to learn how to control it, to harness it. This girl's name was Irina Shido. As she and Zenobia made their way inside, Zenobia would warn that the Empress needed to be careful at all times. Irina would tell Zenobia that she didn't like being called Empress, and to just call her Irina. However, Zenobia was way too formal, remarking that the Red Empress was above all else heaven's greatest priority, and Irina understood this. But she had come back to this town with a purpose. This was her first mission after all. And besides, she needed to find her friend and learn what had happened to him. What happened to Issei? Meanwhile, in another part of town, as Kiba was walking through the rain under the cover of night, a priest would cross his path before falling to the ground dead. As Kiba looked to find the one responsible, the man would step out of the shadows and make himself known. A man that he had come to blows with many times in the past. The stray exorcist, Fried Selzen. He mocked Kiba as he readied himself for battle. This time, no, in possession of a holy sword. As Kiba readied himself against Fried, not really being in the mood for the foul-mouthed priest or his antics, seeing him in possession of a holy sword, that was what truly caught his attention. The two of them beginning their fight under the cover of night and the falling rain. For Kiba, even for his speed, the holy sword that Fried possessed was truly one of devastating power. However, before the fight could get too out of hand, a car, seemingly set ablaze, would come barreling through. Before Fried even had a chance to react, the front of the car would smash into him, sending him flying over into the street. Issei stepped out of the car before flaming into his skull form. Standing beside Kiba, he told him that he had come to help. The two of them getting back up and ready to fight. Free would stand back up, preparing to do battle once more, not just with the devil, but with the spirit of vengeance itself. However, before he could do so, he would be summoned back by his master, and Free would retreat into the night. Both Kiba and Issei would go to look for him, but he was nowhere to be found. As they turned back to one another, while Kiba thanked him for the assist, he told him that he really couldn't have him helping him this time around. But Issei would rebuttal. He would tell Kiba that he might have been a part of the Occult Research Club, but he was not a part of the House of Gremory, meaning that unlike him, he wasn't ordered under Rias to do anything at all. And besides, as the spirit of vengeance, this fell under his jurisdiction. There was more to it than that. The Holy Sword Project, whatever this was, Issei believed it had something to do with Irina as well. And if this could lead him to her, then he had to pursue it. So whether Kiba liked it or not, they were in this together. And Kiba agreed. And the two of them decided that they would work together from then on out. But Issei would also tell Kiba there was something else. He wasn't sure why, but he had a feeling. He sensed that one of the 99 would appear soon if he continued his quest. And that was all the more reason for them to work together now. In the meantime, Sona would speak to Rias, telling her that 2 members of the church had wished to speak with her, and she warned that they were going to be coming that afternoon tomorrow. Rias wondered what this could be all about, why 2 members of the church would suddenly want to meet with the sister of the Devil King. Everyone would be gathered together, Issei and Rainier being the last ones to arrive at the club room, as they were taking a bit of a detour while they were walking from the campus. But as Issei made his way into the room, along with Rainier, what he would see would be something that he truly was not expecting at all, as he made his way, opening the door. As he made his way into the room, not only would he see Zenobia, the girl he had fought at the Holy Temple, but he would also see Irina, Shido. As the two of them saw one another, they would both be left in absolute shock. Of all the places that they could meet, why would they be meeting here? The two of them would race to one another, embracing each other in a long and tight hug, tears welling up for the both of them. Even Zenobia in that moment didn't veer to intervene. No one did. This was something that the two of them needed, something that the two of them had longed for. Now they had finally found one another, both of them asking and having so many questions, wondering what had happened to the other after the crash. Where had they gone? What had they been through? Issei would rush and try to explain things, and so would Irina, but there was one thing though. One thing that ruined the moment. When Irina looked behind Issei, and she saw who was standing there. When she locked her eyes upon Rainier, her anger began to boil, her aura changing from that of kind and loving to a gross, bloodlusted killing intent. Issei knew where this was coming from, and he got in between the both of them. Even Rainier was fearing for her life at this moment. Irina had been used. She remembered that. She thought Rainier was her friend. But now Issei's parents were dead. Issei had now become this demon of sorts, and her life had now changed in ways that she could never go back to being who she used to be. And the one who was responsible for it all was right in front of her. In that moment, Irina pulled out her sword, the holy sword Mimic. She was ready to kill her in that instance, but Issei got between them, telling her to stop. At that moment though, Irina would ask why he was getting involved. Why the hell would he help her of all people? Issei tried to explain himself. He tried to tell her that things weren't the way that she thought they were. But Irina would only yell back in anger, that from where she was standing, things were exactly the way they were. He was now friends with the girl that ruined their lives. She always knew he was a pervert, but really, was he down bad that much? Issei would try to tell her that it had nothing to do with that. That things had changed. And while he wasn't entirely sure at the moment, it couldn't just be that simple. But for Irina, it was that simple. Was he either going to stand with her or with the girl that destroyed their lives? Rainier would try to apologize, but Irina didn't want to hear it. Issei now being caught between them. This was something that he hadn't really thought about. Why was he doing this though? He had every reason not to stand with Rainier. He had every reason to be done with her. But when he looked back towards her, he realized something. She was as alone as any of them could ever be. She truly didn't have anyone at all. And sure, maybe it was the right thing just to kill her and be done with her. But for Issei in that moment, he just couldn't do it. Irina would turn away in anger. As she did so, Zenobia would explain the reason for them being there. Zenobia would explain that of the 6 holy swords known, 3 of them have been stolen by the fallen angels, while the other 3 remain with the church. She would go on to explain that the reason for their coming here was solely to make sure that the devils of this town wouldn't get involved in their affair, believing that this could be seen as an opportunity to help destroy the holy swords, as they were a threat to devils as well as fallen angels. However, Rias would assure them that she wouldn't be getting involved, that none of them were going to be giving aid to either side in this conflict. As both Irina and Zenobia were preparing to leave though, Zenobia would turn her attention towards Asya, referring to her as a witch and a heretic, mocking her for her choices of leaving God to become a devil. This only pissed Issei off even further. And for Irina, even she were getting irritated. The idea that the person she had come to know and care about was sticking up for her enemies. She wasn't sure of how to feel in this moment. Issei would stand to Zenobia, warning her that if she came after Asya or anyone in Rias' household, she would have him to deal with. Zenobia would remark that he must have gotten stronger since the last time they had fought in one another. But he had a taste of what the Sword of Destruction was capable of, and if he wanted to run it back again, she was more than eager to do so, and remind him of what power she held. And Issei, he wasn't ready to back down either. Kiba would join in as well as he walked into the room. If they were looking for an exhibition of sorts, then he was more than willing to give them the fight they were looking for, as a swordsman and as her superior. And Irina, she wanted to blow off some steam, and she decided she would give in as well. This would lead to a bit of a sparring bout between the two sides, Kiba and Issei versus Zenobia and Irina. Zenobia would summon the Sword of Destruction, while Irina would use her sacred gear, one that would surprise everyone. For on her left hand, she donned the Boosted Gear Gauntlet. Both Rias, Akano, and even the others would look on even horrified. Even Kiba was shocked to see this revelation. Issei wasn't really all that worried though, as everyone looked towards him thinking that he was a complete fool. Rias would look at him and ask if he truly didn't know what he was in the presence of, one of the 13 Longinus, and among them, one of the two of the greatest sacred gears in all of history. The Boosted Gear, the container of the Welsh Dragon. Issei asked if that was something he should really be afraid of, and they said that he should. It was a power that could rival God and the Devil Kings, if not surpass them. But Issei smirked. It seemed as though they were truly underestimating the power that he had as well. He had learned from Lady Mephisto that the sacred gears, they were nice. Nice little trinkets, if you will. They were merely tools that contained power. Tools that could easily be taken away. But the spirit of vengeance was something more. It was something greater. That was where the true power lied. As Issei tapped into it, and he morphed into the Ghost Rider, he would move forward with Kiba backing him, Issei taking the lead as Zenobia and Irina walked forward as well. The two sides would begin their battle, Irina and Issei fighting it out with one another. Issei could see that Irina must have been well trained up until now. She was using the boosted gear in conjunction with her holy sword Mimic, the two of them colliding with one another over and over again. Irina was just a shock. Despite the damage she was dealing to Issei, he wasn't going down easily. In fact, he was able to stand and hold his own against her. Kiba in the meanwhile would use Sword Burst, trying his best to find the best sword that he thought could deal damage to the Sword of Destruction. When Issei saw that Kiba was still struggling though, he would yell at Kiba to throw him a regular sword. Kiba would do so instantly. Once Issei took the sword into his hands, he would imbue it with the spirit of vengeance, creating the vengeful sword, Hellraiser. The hilt of the blade was that of a black bone, and the blade itself was pure black, surrounded by flame. As he handed the sculling blade back towards Kiba, he told him to use that one against the Sword of Destruction. Kiba would do so, and suddenly his sword power was able to match that of the destructive blade itself. Rias and the others were shocked and wondered. How on earth was Issei's power that much potent? So strong that just imbuing it into a sword gave Kiba the edge to fight against the holy sword itself. Even Zenobia became a bit fearful in that moment. If Issei truly did have this type of power, that he could turn just a plain sword into one capable of even holding its own against the holy sword, then he was going to be a potential threat. One that no one was going to want to be on the business end of. Issei, however, would continue his focus on Irina. As the two of them continued their duel, Irina asking why Issei would join her. Why? In her own heart she felt betrayed, like Issei didn't care. But that was far from the case. Issei would tell her that he cared about her more than anything, and he was devastated when he lost her. He would try to explain about his meeting with Lady Mephisto, but it was a little difficult in combat. Eventually, the fight would start to get a bit out of hand and Rias would have to call it off into a draw for now. Kiba was a bit angered at this since he felt as though he were making good progress, but he respected her wishes and stepped down. Now that they had gotten the gauge of what their powers were and what they could do, they could see that this was definitely something that they were going to have to look into more in the future. As the fighting came to an end, with the battle now over, Zenobia and Irina would remark that they had to find a priest, one that they had sent in ahead of them, who had mysteriously disappeared. Kiba would inform them, however, that the priest had been killed, and the one who did so was Fried Selzen, and he too had a holy sword. It was now starting to make sense to the two of them what was going on, and as thanks for the information, they would tell them some news as well. They would warn that the fallen angel that was behind all of this, the one that they would be going up against, was Kokabeel. The mention of that word sent Rainier into shock and fear. Her father? So it was him. She had had her suspicions, but she knew more than anything her father wanted a war, an all-out fight between the deities. If anyone would be brazen enough to steal the holy swords, it would be him. As both Irina and Zenobia would leave, Kiba would take his time to leave as well, Rias moving back towards him to ask where he was going. And Kiba already made his intentions clear. He was going to destroy Excalibur at all costs. Rias tried to stop him, begging him to stay and that he was a member of her household. But Kiba would simply remark that if that was the case, then he was no longer a part of the House of Grimmery. Everyone shocked that Kiba would say such things as he simply left them. Both Issei and Rainier would look at one another, no one knowing for sure what they should do at that moment in time. There was no telling what the future held for them. It seemed as though all of their problems were coming together all at once, and the outcome was something that none of them could see in the meantime. The next day, as Issei, Asya, and Rainier were getting ready to head home, Koneko would approach Issei, stopping him for a moment as she needed to speak with him. Issei would tell the others to go on ahead, as he would speak to Koneko and ask her what was upset. She looked to him, not being able to hide her concern. She would explain that she was worried about Kiba, and if he didn't mind, she would want his help in trying to help Kiba. Issei already knew that this could be troublesome for her, since Rias didn't want anyone else from the House of Grimmery getting involved. Technically, he wasn't a part of the House of Grimmery, so this mandate didn't really apply to him. But he could see that Koneko was truly worried for Kiba, as he was her closest friend. And he agreed to help her out, the two of them deciding that they were going to find a chance, and that they were going to find Kiba and help him any way that they could. He told Koneko he would come pick her up after he dropped off Asya and Rainier. Once he had done so, the two of them would go out driving through town trying to find where Kiba had gone. However, instead of finding Kiba, they would find Irina and Zenobia on the side of the road, collecting tithes, trying to build up money to get something to eat, since they had spent everything before they arrived. Issei would pull over and he would offer to get them some food. Even though they were hesitant, they would still agree, Issei taking them out to a diner and allowing them to eat and fill themselves. Even though Irina was still upset with Issei, she was happy that he had come to help her, the two of them really not having that big of animosity, although they understood why they were at where they were. As thanks for the meal, Zenobia would ask them what they wanted, and Issei and Koneko would explain that the only thing they wanted at this moment was to help them destroy the holy swords. After all, by their own admission, the swords were too valuable to be left in the wrong hands, and they would rather see them be destroyed than to be used by those who were evil. If that were the deal, if they helped them destroy a sword or two, that would make their mission a lot more simpler. Irina would be a bit worried about this, but Zenobia and she would both agree that this would be for the best. The group would eventually go and find Kiba and tell them of their plan. Kiba at first was a bit hesitant, and even Zenobia would have to understand where he was coming from. The Holy Sword Project was something looked down upon by the church, and the one responsible was excommunicated. His name? Valper Galilei. At the mention of that name, Issei's body would begin to twitch. Koneko would look to him and ask if he was alright, but he would look to her and say that that was the name. One of the 99. The one he needed to exorcise. Kiba would be shocked to hear this. It seemed as though they really were after the same mark. It means that they were going to have to work together even now, more so, if they were going to bring him down once and for all. Once they had decided what they were going to do, the only thing left now was to wait until nightfall, where they would all gather together and carry out their next move. As Issei went back home, waiting and prepping himself for what was to come, Asya would check on him and make sure that he was alright. He told her that everything was fine, but Asya could see that he was a bit worried. She asked if it was about Irina, and he would nod his head. He didn't think that she of all people would be caught up in something like this. And even now it seemed as though they were on opposite sides for the time being. The last thing he wanted to do was get into a fight with her. He had been trying to find her for all this time. He wondered if this was also a part of Lady Mephisto's plan. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that couldn't be the case. Irina was always met with the destiny she was going to have. Her being the user of the Red Dragon Emperor's power. Or Empress, as of now. But as for him, what did he have to do in all of this? Why was he chosen to be the Ghost Rider? She said something about a prophecy, but he still had no clue of what he was supposed to do. Only that he would be a part of a team that would save the multiverse, or something, whatever that was. But now wasn't the time to worry about that. For now, the only thing he could do was focus on helping Kiba and the others, to find Valper Galilei and put an end to his schemes, and confront whoever was behind this working in the shadows. As nightfall came, Asya would be sound asleep, as Issei threw on his leather jacket preparing to go out. However, he wasn't alone as he was doing so. As he was preparing to leave, Rainier would be waiting for him at the door, all dressed and ready to go as well. He asked her what she planned on doing, and she explained that she wanted to help in any way that she could. She had to atone somehow. If this was to start, then she wanted to take that chance. Issei would warn that atoning wasn't going to be that simple. She could do everything right, and she might not ever get forgiveness. But for Rainier, she understood what she needed to do. Her father, Kokabil, had to be put a stop to. His schemes had gone on long enough, and she felt she were just as responsible. Even if this did absolutely nothing, she knew that just sitting around and feeling sorry for herself wouldn't amount to anything. She needed this. She wanted to do what she could. Issei understood her feelings. and with that he would let her come along, the two of them hopping into his car as they went driving into the night to meet up with the others, as their hunt for the holy swords would begin. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of town, on a tall building overlooking the city itself, under the light of the full moon, there would sit a young boy with hair as dark and as black as a starless sky. He would have a scar over his left eye. As he looked up, his eyes being completely black and devoid of life, he would set out a chuckle to himself as he reminisced over his past. This young boy, while seemingly innocent in nature, was actually a demon of the worst kind. His name was Blackheart, and he had the feeling that a new rider was now on the horizon. So, it seems Mother has found herself a new toy, another rider. I hope you don't disappoint me like all of the others have. Do give me a good challenge, Issei Hiyodo. I haven't had one since I faced Johnny all those years ago. But oh well. Seems as though the older I get, there's nothing left in this world that interests me. The young boy would laugh to himself as the night grew longer, as many of the machinations, as many powerful forces were all gathering together at once. For Issei, his journey was just beginning, and his battles were far from over. This concludes What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider? Highschool DxD, Mark of the Dragon, Season 2, Part 1. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for next week's video on Monday, as we are going to be wrapping up the Season 3 finale for What If Issei Was the Shield Hero? Highschool DxD, Curse of the Shield. Season 3, Part 3, the Season 3 finale. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.